So today I'm going to be doing a review on my first, I guess you can say, high-end microbrand. It is by a company called Visitor out of Indiana. I've met the owner Phil, who's a pretty great guy, and I've wanted this watch for a couple years. I've just never pulled the trigger. It's just super unique, super different, and I appreciate that. So just note the video was fairly long. I had a lot to talk about, a lot of praise, and if you want to skip to any certain part of the videos, there will be timestamps in the description below. And just one more thing to note, I did recently get the strap for it from Blue Shark. If you can tell, it matches the watch fairly perfectly. But this watch strap is not featured in the video because I did not have it yet. But it's a fairly nice strap, and I'd recommend it. So let's get into the video. And just before I get too much into the watch, I wanted to show you just kind of the attention to detail that this brand has. So the watch comes amongst the other boxes that it comes with in this type of three-piece style cylindrical carrying case. And it's very sturdy on the outside, very nicely built, a very substantial zipper, a little handle to carry it with. As you can see there, a little buckle signed Visitor on both sides. And once you unzip it, this happens sometimes, but once you unzip it, you're met with three little styrofoam and removable watch pillows. The inside of it is this nice red, very, very velvety texture. And you might hear that little jingling going on. And these two pillows are kept together by a spring bar tool. So I think it's just very nicely designed, a very nice way to receive a watch, and a very practical and useful packaging to receive, because this is something you can use for your other watches. This is something that is actually very well made and something that's not just going to sit on the shelf and be like, oh, this is just the box that my watch came in. You have the nice little Visitor insignia stitched in there. Super nice box, and I love the feel of this. It's so soft, so you know it's not going to scratch your watches. But yeah, a little about the brand Visitor. They don't have too much readily available web information on their website, but they were founded a couple years ago. They're a microbrand out of Indiana, and I believe their first watch was the Dune Shore, which is kind of their take on a dive watch. Very much has a lot of the same design language as this watch. Very curvaceous case, very different dial design. The hands on those watch are more inspired by, the founder said, fountain pens. So they have a kind of nice futuristic cathedral shape almost. And I think that watch did very well from them. And then from there they released this model, the Vale Park Officer, and recently, I think next month, they're going to come out with their newest model, the Linden, which is the most dressy piece that they've come out with. Moving on to this watch, let's just take some dimensions. So the diameter of this watch is a little tricky because it has an unusual watch shape. But we'll take a couple dimensions. So we'll see that with the crown guard, it is at about 41 millimeters. If we exclude the crown guards, it's closer to 40 millimeters. And if we just take the outer bezel to the other outer bezel, we see that the watch runs at about 37 millimeters. So a pretty decent size. We see the lug to lug distance. We get 47, which is a very nice wearable size. I always say 47 is kind of like the sweet spot, at least for my wrist. We have a height of about 11.5, and we got the lug width of 20. So a couple of specifications for the watch. We have it powered by a Miyota 9015 movement, which is a Japanese movement that beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour. So we have a pretty nice smooth sweep of the seconds hand. We have a 42-hour power reserve, and pretty much everything that's colored on this dial is lumed. So we have this all loomed up with C3 Super Luminova. We have a screw down crown with 50 meters of water resistance, and a sapphire crystal on the front and the back, and the sapphire crystal on the front has a under AR coating, and what is called by Visitor their 4-piece screwed construction case. I don't completely know what that means, but the case is quite convoluted, so I'll just trust their information on that. And the watch is manufactured in Hong Kong, designed in USA, quality control checked in USA, that type of stuff. So, getting into the watch dial. If we look at this dial, I think it is definitely a place where Visitor shines. It is unique. There is no dial it is even pretty much taking inspiration from, or it's taking inspiration so lightly and just making it completely its own. We have the nice little crosshair dial with the kind of 3 dots at the 12, 3, 6, and 9. And 3 dots do play on the, it plays on the Visitor logo because there is a 3-dot motif in there. And we have these kind of teardrop, raindrop shaped markers around at all the other hour markers. We have the nice offset Visitor logo at 3, and on some watches, especially Christopher Ward, they get hate when they have the offset Visitor, not offset Visitor logo, but their offset logo. But I think on this watch, I don't know why, but it works very well. For me, I think personally, it's because instead of having the crosshair cut off at the 12 and having Visitor there, or having it cut short and having the brand name Visitor, it allows the crosshair to be completely full, completely symmetrical, and then just Visitor tucked in there nicely in a matching coloration to the dial, and just very nicely done. As you can see, we have these like very nice rectangular paddle-shaped hands. If you can tell, all the hands are done around in this like black type coating, so they don't stand out, they don't capture light really, they just stand on their own. We see the end of the seconds hand has a triangle tip to it, and we have the railroad outer track. Now, as I said earlier, everything that is green is loomed, so we'll get a loom shot later and you'll see how pretty awesome this loom is. So, as you can see, it's a really not black inky dial, it's a very matte black, almost sun-faded, sun-worn kind of black to it. It is definitely matte versus glossy. The way it catches light, it doesn't really reflect it, it just takes it in and makes it lighter. So in some, mostly inside, it'll be a very dark black dial, as kind of comes through here, but once you get it into light, some of the lighter colors will start shining through. And I think that's a type of kind of visual interest that is brought to the watch, and this also just shows the attention to detail Visitor has. So now that we kind of talked about the dial, let's see if we can get this on a more macro level. So here we are on a more macro level with it, and we can see just how much detail really is in this watch. Something I didn't really even notice until we were at this level is the slight graining we have in this black dial. You can see it almost resembles a type of maybe worn-in leather type of look. It just has all those little nice grooves and creases inside the dial. Very subtle, very nice, and it's something you really don't notice, but it comes together with the complete package to become kind of just something more than the sum of its parts. We can see the Visitor logo is done very decently. There is some slight marks you can see at the bottom of the I, the bottom of the T, but this is not only a sub $1,000 watch, but it is also loomed on that Visitor logo. So I think for what you're getting and from how nice it really looks from the wrist versus up at this level, I think it's done still very well. If we see the kind of coating that's done on that second hand, it's very fine, very complete, not many sharp edges to it. There's not really any lack of coloration or too much lack of coloration in it, and I just think it's very nicely done. We can see even more of the graining in the dial here. the real depth to that sandwich dial, the real nice cutout. We could see how raised and really perfectly circular these little 12, 3, 6, and 9 triad of dots are. How clean and crisp and just well executed that this railroad outer track is. And again, the depth and the preciseness of the shape of the cutout for these little markers here. The whole of this dial just done very, very well. The inside loom for these paddle shaped hands. You can see at the end there we getting kind of a slight bluish kind of tone. That might just be a distortion from my camera, but all of it looks pretty well done, pretty well filled, no real blemishes, no real marks on the dial. And I have to say, for this price, I'm impressed. Under $1,000, I've definitely seen watches that have more defects, more damage, and just a lesser quality of dial work done. So really, this dial really impresses me, and the fact that it even looks great at this macro level is a really testament to how much Visitor cares about their watches. So here's just yet another area that this watch exceeds expectations. We have fully loomed pretty much everything. We have the Visitor logo loomed, the crosshairs loomed, the paddle hands greatly loomed. We have the hour track, the little pip on the seconds hand. I mean, everything. This watch is ultimately legible in the dark. And I think it's just a thing of beauty. So let's relume it really quick and just compare the strength of it with my Timex as always. Now, as we can see, there really isn't that much of a difference. Obviously, there's a difference in coloration, but the strength, I would say, is very similar. Their loom on this watch is very well done. It lasts for a fairly good amount of time. Obviously, there's a greater amount of application on those hands, as you can see, as they shine brighter. But overall, the loom is really good. So moving on to the case of this watch, and I really do think that's pretty much the star of the show. It really is just so unique. We have a mixture of finishings here. You see we have brushing along this very deeply sloped conical type bezel. You see in this little groove here we have more polishing, but along this little, I don't even know what you would call this, but along this little swoop here we have more brushing. The brushing here is done vertically. The brushing on the bezel is done in a circular fashion. We have brushing on the tops of the lugs that just go downwards, and then a very high polish on the mid case with a blasted inlay in the crown. I don't know if the crown is matted or brushed, but it stands out very well, and the grooves within it are very well defined, very easy to grip, very nice to unscrew. And you see on the case here, we have brushing all along it. And if you look at the lugs, he defines these as rolled lugs because they come down, they swoop, but it comes back up at the very end there, and it kind of rolls into a point that is then pierced to make, strap changing easier, which I love about this watch, because I really love pierced lugs in any watch. It just makes it fun to wear, easy to change straps, and just a real joy. But just look at that profile, so pronounced, so unique. From here it just looks alien. It's like a UFO or a futuristic sports car. It's just such a cool design, such a cool concept. And as you can see, there's a little something special to the case here, and that is because the case back is open. I said there's a sapphire case back, but here you see we have a closed and brushed case back. But the reason for that is you just unscrew the crown, it pops open. Oh, not yet. pops open. It doesn't have to be fully unscrewed, but you unscrew it a little bit and you see this beautiful, gorgeous Hunter case back. You can see this custom Miyota rotor with the visitor knocker symbol on it. We have the nice, fine, I don't even know what you would call that, kind of blasted I don't even know what you would call that, like the blasted finishing on the very edge of the rotor. Again, the 3 dots in the middle to tie back to the visitor. We have the nice striping on the central movement. And yes, it is a little undecorated in these parts, but I think the overall beauty and the amazingness of the rotor shine through. We have perlaging on this little inside flap here, and I love how they put all the information in the recess of this case right here. We see that it says it's made in Indiana. We have the Vale Park, which is the model name. We have the officer, which is also the model name. And we have Visitor Watch Co. And again, the 3 dots, which is part of their logo. It's very cleanly done, no information you don't need, and not too much writing on the back. And really, it's just beautiful, beautiful to look at. And even the detail here, you see how the open case back is above the rest of the case. We have a channel here which rises to the case and just displays this gorgeous, gorgeous looking movement. That is awesome. And you just screw it back in, and boom, case back is solid. So I think that's just a really cool addition, very nice touch, and it just shows not only the uniqueness of this watch, but the beauty of the design. I think that the case back really mirrors the front of the watch because, as I said, we have this very prominent upwardly sloping bezel that just pops off the watch. And again, if we look again at the case back, we have this same kind of conical bezel type thing that just pops out of the case back. And I think for how much the watch has, height added to it, how much design is spread upwards, it is still very relatively thin at like, I don't know what it was, under I think 12 millimeters. I mean, that's beautiful and that's crazy. So let's look at how this watch wears. So earlier today, I was wearing my 32 millimeter Tudor Prince date. Love this watch. And as I said, this watch, it is about 40 millimeters, but I think on the wrist, you'll see that it wears very, very well, especially on my small 6.5 inch wrist. So here we have it on the wrist, and you can see that 47 millimeter lug to lug distance is really helping it wear very, very secure on the wrist. It does not overhang by any standard. It does not look too tall, I think, by any standard. I think the curves of the case help it sit on the wrist very well. And I think for some reason, this watch is almost just fun to have on the wrist. I think when you're looking at it from just your day-to-day telling time and whatnot, it just stands out to you. It's just different, it's unique, it just speaks to you when it's on the wrist. It has such a defined and undeniably just fun shape that whenever I look at it on the wrist, whenever I'm wearing this watch, it brings a smile to my face because I'm just like, wow, this is a unique and cool piece. But yeah, as I said, you have those rolled lugs, so you can have a lot of different straps, rolled and pierced lugs, so you can always change the strap, get a different look with this watch. As you can kind of see, there's not really a taper to the lugs. They don't go inwards. They do taper from the base, so I think it kind of makes it appear to wear slimmer on the outer edges, but the case width is very defined. It sits very prominent on the wrist, but it doesn't overpower it. I feel it wears very similar to how a small Panerai does. I tried on the new 38 millimeter Panerais in AD the other week, and I got the same vibe as I do when I wear this watch. It's just a beefy yet classy watch on the wrist. And I think all the design elements, how the bezel slopes down and inward below where this case lies, just comes together from the top point of view to just become more than just the sum of its parts. I don't really know what it is about this watch, but I feel like you have to wear it. You have to see it in person, and it just speaks to you. It's just undeniably cool. So before I move on completely to my pros and cons, I did want to mention the strap that it comes with. Recently, they just came out with a very unique bracelet that can come with this. It does not fit perfectly into the case. It just is a regular straight lug situation. And I think they did that so it can actually fit on other watches and other of their upcoming watch models. But it's a very unique bracelet. It, again, takes design cues from the 3-dot motif that they are interested in. But I want to talk about this wingtip leather strap. So obviously it gets its name from one, the kind of wingtip and embroidered type. Obviously it gets its name from its wingtip styling, like the shoe, where it has, you know, this embroidery. It has the holes in it, and it does really remind you of a classic vintage type of shoe. And this strap is very dressy. It is very unique. It is very, very supple, very well made, thick but not too thick. I think it's the perfect thickness. The stitching is done immaculately. The holes are very deep and very well defined, and I think it just looks amazing. The nice completely brown backing and the black and brown on the upper side. And if we see this buckle, I mean, the design influence matches the buckle. This isn't any boring tang. This is a well thought out, purposefully designed buckle. It matches the design language of the case. If you put these next to each other, you know they're meant to go together. It is undeniable. We have the fact that the end of the pin literally sits into the end of the buckle. So it's machined greatly. It's unique. And it's just another way you see how amazing Visitor just really does with their watches. They just care, and their design speaks volumes. It really does. And I even think that the end of this spring bar, it kind of reminisces to the end of the lugs here. I mean, it's almost very similar. It's very, very apparent that the design language is consistent throughout this whole watch. And that's just something I really appreciate in this brand. So let's put the watch back on my wrist for the pros and cons section, because as I said, I just love to wear this watch. It's so, so comfortable. So pro, as I was just kind of mentioning, is that this watch is comfortable to wear. I always thought it would be oversized, but it wears perfectly. It wears like a dream. On a silicone strap like this, or a pearl-on, etc., even the stock leather it comes with, it conforms so nicely to the wrist and it just wears awesomely. Another major pro, the design in every sense of the design. We have the unique and beautiful dial, the layering, the crosshairs, the Visitor logo, the completely crazy amount of lume that's on this watch. We have the unique and just so individualistic case, the curves, the drilled lugs, the way that it is a large watch, but they kept the lug-to-lug distance shorter. And they did that because they care. They know how a watch should wear. They understand the proportionality of the watch. And it just comes through in the design. I love, really, the offset logo. I think it defines this watch. It makes this watch. Again, I love the packaging, as we saw earlier. It's very useful, very well made, and just a very nice addition for this under $1,000 price point. And I think, bringing that up, I think another pro is the price. I'm pretty sure these retail new if you get it on the leather strap at $800. The bracelet is an additional $100, but of course the bracelet is an additional option. For $100, you're getting a high beat movement, a unique individual design, a watch you're not going to see another person wearing in the wild. You're getting a beautiful carrying case, a gorgeous, gorgeous decorated movement. Let's just take a look at that again. Look at that. Just amazing. So, if I didn't mention it already, I also love that it has drilled lugs because that makes strap changing awesome. But now we're on to cons of the watch. Something I don't love is the coloration on the dial. It is a very particular green. It is a very hard green to match to some other straps. And I think if they would have done it in white, it would have not only looked 10 times better, but been 10 times more versatile. I understand the choice to go with the green shade because of not only the Lume, but also because that it's trying to call back to an officer style watch because of the name Vale Park Officer. But I think they could have gone, or at least offered, another dial variant. They did post a picture on Instagram. You can go look at their Instagram where they did make this in a whited out version. I think it was just editing, but it just looked so much better to me, in my personal opinion. And if that watch came out, I would sell this immediately and buy that one instead, because I just found that to be much more pleasing, the monochromatic nature of it and just the ability of it to match more. Another con that I would say is some of the tolerances on this watch. So obviously this watch is very uniquely machined, very intensive on all the details, and very well done on many of the details, but some parts have a little bit of trouble. We see right here that there's a lot of wobble in that crown. So sometimes it feels a little, I'm not going to say cheap, but it feels a little insecure in daily use. If you're winding it, if you're trying to push it in and it moves to one side, you're like, oh God, I don't want it to break. So that's just a tolerance issue that I feel like that can be tightened up at some point. I don't know if that has to do with the 100 case back or what that has to do with. Speaking of the 100 case back, I feel like maybe they could have made this hinge a little more, I guess the word would be resistant or strong, I guess, just to where it doesn't just flap open so openly when you unscrew the crown, because I feel like if they would have added more resistance so that you kind of have to purposefully open it up, or added resistance at a certain point so that it stops like right here and then you have to open it up manually the rest of the way. I think that not only would have added a type of romance to the watch in where you have to manually open the watch as if it was a pocket watch just to see the beauty of it, but it also would have been, I think, more practical, because this can just fall out, bang something over time. I don't know, maybe it becomes even looser, but I think if there was more resistance, it would have felt of higher quality. The last con I have is getting one of these watches. So it's not necessarily a con, but you can't just go out and buy this watch right now. You have to go to their website, put yourself on a waiting list, and the normal wait time for this watch is about 6 months. And that's a lot of time to have to wait for a watch. Now, fortunately enough, you don't have to pay before you get the watch. You pay only when your spot opens, but you still have to go through the wait. And I understand that, because obviously these are so, I would say, intensive to have to make. I'm sure there's so many cases that turn out wrong. There's so many dials that turn out imperfect. And the level of quality in all this, I do appreciate. But I just feel like it is hard to get one. So it's not necessarily a con to me, because I waited, I was okay with it. But it may be a con to some people because it's not super readily available. But overall, final opinions, I adore this watch. The brand is amazing. The founder behind it is a great guy who answers questions so readily. He's always available on call. And this watch is just unique. for under $1,000, I think the value of it is undeniable. The beauty of it is undeniable, and just I could just look at it all day. But yeah, I think this is great for people who want something different in their collection. If you want a field watch but you don't like all the Fliegers and the Stoas, I think this is a cool little futuristic alternative. If you're just in love with the case style, if you want kind of something that's kind of beefy on the wrist but also elegant in a way, I think this is very right up that alley. And just overall, if you want a cool watch, you want a fun watch, you want a good watch, this is it. Thanks for watching.